Trevor. This is the recap for September 20th House Commons question period. A little later today, also wearing the headphones. I had this all set up with the Blue Yeti software from Logitech, and I did an update, and I can't save my settings on it anymore. So I just popped on the headphones. Way easier to do that. I don't have time today to play around with this. I was at the million-person march, March for Kids, Leave Our Kids Alone, Protect Trans Rights. The counter-protesters were there here in Nanaimo. Also saw Antifa. I encourage you to watch my video. I did a live stream about 45 minutes, I believe it was, and just covering most of the footage of what was going on today. Quite a few scrums, lots of yelling, all the way through. RCMP involved in a few of the scrums. No one arrested as far as I saw. The RCMP basically had the two sides opposite on the sidewalks, each on their own side. Unfortunately, Nanaimo, if you know Nanaimo, our downtown core is shaped like an amphitheater. The streets like make up the rows of an amphitheater. So a little confusion, and the two sides crossed a few times, which made for some fun. Anyways, just a preface to the question period today. I actually really like when it goes out of order. I mean that to an extent. Of course, we have business that needs to get done. And so the Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, is away. He's in New York right now at some meeting for 3 days. And so Champaign is the first one up to speak here for the Liberal Party. And I just have to laugh. The Conservatives really applauded because the Liberals were really excited that Champaign was speaking first. Then the Conservatives were cheering loudly because they thought it was funny that they don't give that kind of applause for Justin Trudeau, but when Champaign's speaking, he got that sort of applause. So let's just roll right into it here. I'm actually on the wrong video here. This is with Champaign.
Je suis sûr que le chef de l'opposition aimerait avoir une réponse, alors on va vous demander de vous calmer. C'est beau de vous voir tout excité et content de voir ce qui se passe, mais je vais laisser la parole au ministre. Allez-y. Allez-y.
Wow. The Liberals, for the first time, seem to be happy with the person leading them during question period. I congratulate the member for his new role.
Of course, he doesn't have a new role.
Another guy from Shawinigan might become Prime Minister. And I understand. Even the Liberals want to sack the Prime Minister because the Prime Minister costs too much and he's not worth the cost. He's just not worth it.
All right, so not too much said there. I just want to throw in the banter.
His recent retreat in Charlottetown, the Prime Minister said that life is really tough for politicians. Today he's off for another trip to New York for 3 days to give a couple of speeches and burn a whole lot of fuel. At the same time as he raises carbon taxes on Canadians for the crime of driving to work and feeding their families. Yesterday, inflation was up and way up. It is accelerating. It is higher than in the States and in Japan, which could drive up interest rates. Will he balance the budget and axe the tax to bring inflation and interest rates down?
I do feel it myself. I really think the prices are starting to get unbearable. Where I mentioned that Pierre was out of order there. One of the standing orders for the House of Commons is you can't mention that a member is away. Of course, they have other business to do and whatnot. And I really wanted to say that because this is just pointing out to me how I believe Karina Gold is going to be an absolute horrible House Leader for the Liberals. And I expect there to be numerous times where Andrew Scheer is just going to completely walk over her. Scheer, like him or not, probably knows more than anybody in the House about proceedings.
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I don't know what
Order. 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 There we go. Okay, I realize it's Wednesday and everybody's excited and the emotions are running high, but we have to get through question period. Let's see if we can just calm down and hear the questions and the answers.
Well, they're prepared to thunderously applaud anyone other than their own leader who stands up in the House of Commons. No wonder the Prime Minister says it's a really hard time to be a politician. And, you know, right now, speaking of hard times, he's off in New York for another 3 days, burning a lot of jet fuel while he applies a carbon tax that he wants to quadruple to 61 cents a litre on farmers, single parents, on struggling working class families who have to choose between eating and heating. Will the Prime Minister park the plane, end the high carbon hypocrisy, and axe the tax?
The only thing I'm going to say about that I disagree with is it's not really a tripling of the carbon tax. They're just being manipulative on the term because it's the third increase on the carbon tax, right? So some difference in verbiage there.
It's really incredible that this high-flying, high-carbon hypocrite is jetting around the world at the expense of Canadian taxpayers at the same time as he raises fuel taxes on everyday Canadians. The NDP supports him 100% in this 61 cent a litre carbon tax that they want to impose. That and the inflationary deficits have driven inflation back up. Will this government finally end the inflationary taxes and deficits so that we can bring down rates before Canadians go bankrupt?
The Honourable Minister for Housing.
Mr. Speaker, over nearly 2 decades in Canadian politics, he hasn't seen a program that helps Canadians he doesn't want to cut. Over the course of my time in this chamber, I've watched him attack the programs that support my constituents. Programs like employment insurance, programs like the Canada Pension Plan. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to put forward measures that are going to support Canadians during their time of need. He may dismiss them as big fat government programs. I call them programs that put food on the table for families who live in my community.
Yeah, well, of course, some of it helps, right? Some of it's much needed in our society, but we go to extremes with it with this Liberal Party. It's just ridiculous. We didn't see this kind of spending with Chrétien or Martin, but of course, both Trudeau's, the Liberals on the outside of those other two prime ministers caused a lot of increase in spending. They borrowed more money. You know, Trudeau's borrowed more money than all the other prime ministers in Canada's history. It's just gotten ridiculous. It's another $63 billion, I believe, this year that we've added to our debt, and that goes on top of $300 and some billion that we refinanced of our debt in Canada. So Jagmeet is up here. Jagmeet's
Mr. admitted that he could have and should have done more to build affordable homes in Canada. Now the reality is we have a situation where we're losing more affordable homes than we are building as a nation. Now, what does the Prime Minister have to say to a renter who is living in a home that he can afford right now, but lives in fear that one day that home will be rent-evicted or dem-evicted and he'll lose it? What does a Prime Minister have to say to ensure that people will be able to stay in the homes that they can afford?
The Honourable Minister for Housing.
Mr. Speaker. I share the honourable member's concern about making sure some of the most vulnerable Canadians have a safe and affordable place to call home. That was, in fact, the motivation for the National Housing Strategy, where our government re-entered the social housing space after decades of governments, I should say, of different partisan stripes, vacated it. In reality, Mr. Speaker, we know that we need to do more. That is why we move forward with eliminating GST on apartments that are going to be rented to Canadians. Part of the solution to the housing crisis is to build more homes, and that is exactly what we're going to do.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
On ne veut pas entendre.
This is not what we want to hear. We don't want promises. We want things to get done. Currently, it's impossible to find affordable housing because there just isn't any. If a Canadian wants to find a unit to rent, well, there are no units with affordable rent. So what is this Prime Minister going to do? How will the Prime Minister guarantee that affordable units will be built?
L'honorable ministre.
The Honourable Minister.
We won't. We're building less.
Mr.
homes,
Speaker,
giving more to Liberal
it's
donors.
true that it's difficult when Canadians can't find affordable housing. That's why our government implemented the National Housing Strategy. After decades without necessary investments being made, through our strategy, we're building more affordable units.
Last week, we eliminated GST on the construction of apartments in this country. This is going to add to the supply, this is going to reduce the cost for people to rent, and provide protection for people who are struggling to find a place to call home. It's the right path forward. We're going to continue.
Short with the immigration policy that Fraser used to be in charge of. That's another one, like him or not. Fraser's a great public speaker. Far better than I am, that's for sure. Far better than most people in the House. I don't agree with a lot of what he says or things he's done, but he is a great public speaker, that's for certain.
The coalition's making all kinds of excuses for their radical tax hikes. They say that the carbon tax does not affect Quebec. That's false. This second carbon tax, supported by the Bloc, will add 20 cents.
Of course, the carbon tax affects another province. This is the same Liberal Party that will tell us that it's global inflation causing the problem in Canada, while also denying that if I buy something from Alberta, I'm paying the carbon tax off with that. When it's getting shipped to BC, well, there's still carbon tax on getting it shipped to me with fuel costs, right?
To the cost of a litre of gas. After 8 years, the Liberals have managed to convince the leader of the Bloc Québécois to take more money out of Quebecers' pockets and send it where? To Ottawa. That is obviously irresponsible if they want to help families who are struggling. Voting for the Bloc is costing people a lot, Mr. Speaker. Why is the Prime Minister backing the Bloc's plan to radically increase taxes at the expense of Quebecers? The Honourable
Quebec
Minister.
is gonna be in such worse problems that
Thank you,
they
Mr.
don't
Speaker.
create enough.
What is drastic and irresponsible is denying the existence of climate change. That is what the Conservatives have been doing for years. They are telling 80% of Canadians who are getting more in their pockets, they're telling people that they don't deserve a more affordable life. And you know what's irresponsible and unacceptable is that the Conservative Party, just 2 years ago, they themselves suggested carbon pricing or pollution pricing, and now they're singing another tune.
No, not really. They have not announced anything for a carbon tax change.
Canadians want right now is for inflation to go down and for interest rates to fall, not to pour fuel on the fire of inflation. That was what this finance minister promised last year. Instead, mortgage interest rates are up 31%. Inflation is up 4% this month alone. After 8 years, this Liberal NDP government refuses to be the financial stewards that this country so desperately needs. The Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister finally stop his inflationary spending so Canadians can keep a roof over their head?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, let's be specific about what they're talking about when they're talking about cuts. Because when they're talking about dealing with global inflation, they want to do it on the backs of the most vulnerable, as if cutting from the most vulnerable people in Canada is going to somehow fix global inflation. That means, as an example, with the dental care program that we're rolling out, 3.5 million seniors will lose their dental care. That means 181,000 people with disabilities will lose their dental care. That means 1 million children will lose their dental care. That's what they're talking about, Mr. Speaker. Let's be clear about what their real plan is.
The honourable member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
And empty, condescending rhetoric.
For dental. The provinces already have dental plans set up. The Liberal plan created the brand new program, extra government employees, so they could say they're fixing the unemployment rate. But we've wasted all this money that could have actually gone to help people. So you can't really pat yourselves on the back because you're helping less people than you could have if you just gave the money to the provinces. So here we got Speaker Rota. I found this really funny when I first watched it. Speaker Rota calls out a couple of Conservative MPs for being too loud in a funny way.
Now, before going to the next question, I just want to compliment the honourable members for South Shore St. Margaret's and Dufferin Caledon, who are very quiet during the questions. Now, if you could just carry that through the answers, I would really appreciate it. The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Conservative and liberal.
Again, good little laugh. Nice to have those laughs in between here and there. What do we got coming up next here? These are our last two segments.
Mr. Speaker, as Canadians, we should be making sure that all our kids feel safe, loved, and supported. But right now, anti-trans demonstrations across Canada are making this impossible, especially for trans kids. In June, the Conservatives blocked an NDP motion calling on all Canadian leaders to condemn this rising tide of hate and violence. Will the Liberals join New Democrats in condemning this anti-2S LGBTQI plus hate by supporting our motion when it comes back to the House? Will they join us in demonstrating that Canada is truly a country where there's no space for hate?
Is it really hate to want to know what's happening with my child in the kid's school? I just find that absolutely ridiculous. BC and Quebec, once my kid turned 13 here in BC, I feel so cut off of what's happening in their life. I'm not allowed to know what happens with the school counselor or any of these decisions that the kid's making, including missing most of a year of school and then being allowed to decide, the kid being allowed to decide on their own that they pass that grade without actually passing that grade. Like, I want my kid to have an education, right? I want my kid to work for it. And I went to the Million Person March today in Nanaimo, as I said, and none of these people were hateful. Like, nobody was saying anything about anti-gay, the leave our kids alone side. They just don't want the sexuality stuff pushed so much in our schools, right? I don't see the reasons for it. Here in Nanaimo, I know for a fact one of the kids' school has at least 12 different books that depict porn, like cartoon porn, right? And why does a kid that's 6 years old in kindergarten need to have access to taking one of these books out of our schools? They just don't. And they talk about trans rights being taken away, but yet I've never heard anybody be able to explain what right is being taken away. Every time that they mention, you're not saying their pronouns, and that's discrimination. Well, no, not really. We haven't had any court rule that. Even our wacko BC Human Rights Commissioner here in BC hasn't really said that that's discrimination, and can't, because it doesn't fit into the laws that we have, right? We're going to end up breaking BC laws for human rights, as well as charter rights that we have federally.
For diversity.
Probably could have just cut this part out. It's basically just the Liberals pandering to what the NDP said. And again,
Mr. Speaker, and a special thank you to the member across for his work, his advocacy, and his lived experience. Absolutely, we stand with trans and queer youth, and as I reflect on what has happened outside these walls today, the marches that we see, I remind everybody that as a parent, I understand the need for parents to be at the center of their kids' lives. But I also very much understand the need to center trans and queer kids and make sure that they are heard, make sure that they have safe spaces. To those kids, we're with you.
How can we have our full responsibility to look after our children when we're getting cut out of what's happening with our child's life? Like, all I get to know from my child's school is the assignments that they have and the grades that they get. There's nothing else. So this last one here is on...
Mr. Speaker, as we speak, the Ukrainian people are risking everything and sacrificing their lives to defend their homeland against Russia's genocidal invasion. Russia's invasion is not just an existential threat to Ukraine. It is also the primary reason for food and energy price inflation here in Canada and around the world, and it is a major threat to global security and to Canada's security. So Canada must stand with the Ukrainian people until they win. Could the Minister of National Defence share with Canadians what Canada is doing to support the brave people of Ukraine?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
I'd like to begin by thanking the member from the Etobicoke Centre not only for his question, but for his exceptional leadership in support of the Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, in the face of Russia's unrelenting brutality and aggression, Ukrainians have fought back with remarkable strength and courage. And Canada continues to stand with them. Canada has already provided over $1.8 billion in military aid. Earlier this week, Mr. Speaker, while visiting our soldiers in the United Kingdom who are training Ukrainian soldiers, I announced that Canada will contribute $33 million to a British-led air defense partnership. And this investment, Mr. Speaker, will equip Ukraine with the tools that they need to defend their skies and to protect critical infrastructure. Canada and our partners and allies will always support Ukrainian friends in the comprehensive military they need to fight.
The Honourable Member for Dufferin.
We've deeply supported Ukraine beyond the means that we could support Ukraine. When Stephen Harper was Prime Minister and the Liberals were in opposition, they talked about how the Conservatives are training these Nazis. The Harper government started this Operation Unifier. Started this Operation Unifier, put $400 million into it, and Liberals complained that the Conservative Party was funding Nazis. Now, when the Liberals came into power, they kept that fund going, made it yearly, and ended up doubling it to $800 million. Then the conflict started in Ukraine, and now we're like almost $9 billion. It's over $8 billion that we've given to Ukraine. There's so much that we could do with that money in Canada. It's just ridiculous. So that's all I got for you guys tonight. Appreciate you watching. Thanks for listening to my raspy voice the last couple of days. I had a few things just not working for me and getting this going. I do hope you check out the live stream that I did. Click on my Heard with Trevor name below the video here and the live videos, and you'll see my video with the million person march here today. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you guys have a great night.